every investigation into a shooting goes into the human factor here, which will be the officer himself, or the agent here.
At 11:47 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on a frozen Tuesday morning, the Federal Bureau of Investigation executed coordinated arrest warrants across Minnesota and Ohio, taking into custody 15 sitting judges in what federal prosecutors are now calling the most sophisticated transnational judicial corruption network ever discovered on American soil. 15 judges, not clerks, not court administrators, judges who wore black robes, who took oaths under God, who sentenced criminals and decided the fate of families. These judges accepted approximately $63 million in bribes from a Somali transnational criminal cartel operating narcotics, financial fraud, and human trafficking routes through the Midwest and across 3 continents. Over 9 years, these 15 judges systematically compromised over 1,200 criminal cases, 1,200 times that justice was sold, 1,200 times that the courtroom became an auction house. And this was not corruption born out of weakness or desperation. This was command-level collusion. This was judicial power weaponized for a criminal empire that stretched from Minneapolis to Mogadishu, from Columbus to the Horn of Africa, and every shadow in between. What you are about to hear is not just about broken oaths. It is about how a transnational criminal cartel identified the weakest seam in the American legal system and tore it wide open. It is about how power does not always announce itself with violence. Sometimes it moves in silence, behind closed doors, in encrypted messages, in offshore accounts that never show a name. And it is about how 15 people entrusted with justice became the executioners of it. Let me show you how deep this goes, and I promise you the next part is worse. 4:32 a.m., January 14th, South Minneapolis, Minnesota. The streets are dead quiet. Fog rolls thick off the Mississippi River, clinging to empty intersections and shuttered storefronts. Neon signs flicker in Somali-owned cafes and late-night hookah bars. No movement, no sound except the distant hum of a semi-truck on Interstate 35 W. Then from every direction, they come. FBI tactical units, DEA strike teams, ICE Homeland Security Investigations agents in black body armor, Department of Homeland Security personnel, U.S. Marshals Service, fugitive task forces, over 200 federal agents moving in coordinated silence through the Cedar Riverside neighborhood, through Carmel Square, through sections of South Minneapolis that most federal operations had avoided for years. They hit 7 locations simultaneously. A 3-story building on Riverside Avenue that functions as a community legal aid office by day, a luxury townhouse in Edina where a Hennepin County judge lives behind wrought iron gates, a halal restaurant in the Midtown Global Market that doubles as a Hawala money transfer hub, a small law office in downtown Minneapolis with encrypted servers humming in the basement, a suburban home in Bloomington where cash is stored in vacuum-sealed bags beneath the garage floor, and 2 addresses in Columbus, Ohio, where sitting judges are woken by flashbang grenades and federal warrants. The breaches are fast and violent, doors smashed open with hydraulic rams, agents pouring into dim hallways with rifles raised, red laser sights cutting through the darkness, suspects stumbling out of bedrooms with their hands in the air, some trying to run, one man shoving a duffel bag full of cash into a kitchen cabinet before he is slammed to the floor. At the Riverside Avenue office, agents find metal filing cabinets stuffed with case files, handwritten notes in Somali and English, ledgers tracking payments to judges by case number and sentencing outcome. In the basement, they find 4 laptops still running, monitors glowing blue with encrypted messaging apps open. One screen shows a list of upcoming trial dates, Another shows wire transfer confirmations routed through banks in Dubai, Nairobi, and Istanbul. At the Edina townhouse, agents discover a wall safe hidden behind a bedroom closet. Inside, $217,000 in cash, stacked in vacuum-sealed bricks, a diamond Rolex, a Somali passport under a false name, and a steel USB drive containing over 4,000 pages of financial records. In Columbus, Ohio, agents breach a modest brick home in the suburb of Westerville at the exact same moment. Inside, they find Judge Amina Hassan Khalif, a respected Franklin County Municipal Court judge, kneeling in her living room with her hands behind her head. On her kitchen table, agents find a manila envelope containing $38,000 in $100 bills and a handwritten note in Somali that reads, translated later by federal linguists, Case 24, SR 9801, dismissed, agreed fee. By 6:11 a.m., all 15 judges are in federal custody. But what agents find in those first raids is not the end of the investigation. It is the beginning of something much larger. Because in that legal aid office on Riverside Avenue, in the server farm, hidden in the basement, analysts discover something that stops them cold. Encrypted communications logs, thousands of them, messages between judges and cartel operatives using coded language, case numbers, payment amounts, sentencing instructions, and something else, a master file labeled in Somali, Marigaha Shukun, translation, the Judgment Network. Federal agents realize they are not looking at isolated corruption. They are looking at an organized system, a judicial cartel within the cartel itself. 9:14 a.m., FBI Minneapolis Field Office, Brooklyn Center, Minnesota. Inside a secure cyber forensics lab on the third floor, analysts from the FBI's Innocent Images and Transnational Crime Units sit shoulder to shoulder with Department of Homeland Security, financial investigators, and DEA intelligence specialists. The room smells like burnt coffee and dry erase marker. On the wall, 6 monitors display a sprawling digital network that looks less like a criminal conspiracy and more like a military operation. They have cracked the encryption on 4 laptops and 2 external hard drives seized from the Riverside Avenue office. What they find inside is staggering. The network is called Operation Kakli Galbeed, in English, Western Mind. It is a 9-year criminal infrastructure built to control judicial outcomes in federal and state courts across Minnesota and Ohio. The architects are not judges. They are senior commanders within a Somali transnational criminal organization with financial and narcotics operations spanning 5 countries. The structure is precise. At the top, shell companies registered in Delaware, Wyoming, and Nevada, fake logistics firms, sham import-export businesses, nonprofit foundations claiming to fund Somali diaspora education programs. These entities exist only on paper, but they move millions of dollars per month through business accounts at Wells Fargo, U.S. Bank, and Huntington National Bank. The money comes from drug distribution networks in Minneapolis, Columbus, Seattle, and Nashville, heroin, fentanyl pills pressed in suburban basements, methamphetamine shipped in bulk from Mexican suppliers and redistributed through Somali street networks, cocaine moving through Midwestern trucking routes. But the cartel's largest revenue stream is not narcotics. It is financial fraud, hawala money transfer networks that move untraceable cash across borders, COVID-19 relief fraud operations that siphoned over $42 million from federal Paycheck Protection Program loans, Medicaid billing schemes run through fake home health care companies, wire fraud targeting elderly victims through call centers in Nairobi and Kampala. The money flows into offshore accounts in the United Arab Emirates, Kenya, and Turkey. From there, it is cleaned through real estate purchases, luxury car dealerships, gold bullion trades, and reinvestment into legitimate Somali-owned businesses in the Twin Cities and Columbus. But a carefully calculated portion, is reserved for a single purpose: buying judges. Analysts zoom in on a spreadsheet labeled Jukunka Lakagta, translation, the Judgment Fund. The spreadsheet lists 15 names, 15 judges, some serving in Minnesota's Hennepin County District Court, others in Ramsey County, 2 federal magistrate judges in the District of Minnesota, 3 judges in Ohio's Franklin County and Cuyahoga County courts, 1 judge serving on the Minnesota Court of Appeals. Next to each name is a number, the total amount paid to that judge over 9 years. The amounts range from $2 million to over $6 million per judge. Total disbursements, $63 million, but the spreadsheet does not just track payments, it tracks outcomes. Each judge has a performance column, number of cases assigned, number of favorable rulings, number of dismissed charges, number of reduced sentences. The data is presented like a quarterly earnings report, because that is exactly what it is. One name stands out: Judge Yasmin Farah Abdi, a 53-year-old Hennepin County District Court judge who emigrated from Somalia in 1998, earned her law degree from the University of Minnesota, served as a public defender, and was appointed to the bench in 2010 with strong community backing and bipartisan political support. She is widely respected. She has been featured in local media as a trailblazer, a role model for Somali American youth, a symbol of immigrant success and integration. She is also, according to federal investigators, the command architect of Operation Kakli Galbeed. Her digital signature is everywhere: encrypted messages authorizing payments to other judges, financial transfers from shell companies into accounts controlled by her brother, who runs a used car dealership in Burnsville, instructions to cartel operatives on which cases to prioritize, which defendants to protect, and which prosecutors to avoid. She is not a corrupt judge who lost her way. She is a cartel facilitator who wore judicial robes as camouflage. And her plan was not just to help a few cartel members escape justice. Her plan, detailed in seized strategic documents, was to transform the Minnesota and Ohio judicial systems into permanent safe havens for Somali transnational criminal networks, to ensure that no matter how many arrests federal agents made, the courtroom would always be controlled territory. This is not corruption. This is command-level collusion. This is not negligence. This is engineered treason against the justice system itself. Analysts stare at the screens in silence. One senior FBI investigator, a 26-year veteran who has worked organized crime cases from the Italian mafia to MS-13, leans back in his chair and says quietly, "I have never seen judicial corruption on this scale, not in any case anywhere." The lead prosecutor from the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Minnesota walks into the room. She looks at the digital map of shell companies, offshore accounts, and judicial payoffs. She looks at the performance spreadsheet tracking 1,200 compromised cases, and she says, "We are not done. This operation has just begun." 5:47 a.m. January 16th, Joint Federal Task Force Command Center, Minneapolis. Dawnlight filters through bulletproof windows overlooking the northern stretch of the Twin Cities. Inside the command center, a 40-foot digital map dominates the far wall. It shows Minnesota and Ohio in high resolution. Across the map, 73 red markers pulse in synchronized rhythm. Each marker represents a location tied to Operation Kakli Galbeed, cartel safe houses, Hawala money transfer hubs, fake nonprofit offices, judges' residences, shell company addresses, financial document storage facilities, encrypted server farms, and one location that makes every agent in the room go silent when it appears on the map. A private office inside the Hennepin County Government Center in downtown Minneapolis. Judge Yasmin Farah Abdi's chambers. The operation is called Tidal Reckoning. Over 1,100 federal agents are deployed across 2 states, FBI tactical units, DEO field divisions, ICE Homeland Security investigations teams, U.S. Marshals Service, Department of Homeland Security, Financial Crimes Task Force, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives agents. U.S. Postal Inspection Service investigators tracking wire fraud, IRS criminal investigation units following the money and support assets that nobody talks about on the record. Black Hawk helicopters from Joint Base McGuire-Dix Lakehurst repositioned to Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. Armored personnel carriers staged in federal parking lots. U.S. Navy riverine units monitoring the Mississippi River for potential smuggling routes or fugitive escape attempts. F-15 fighter jets from the Minnesota Air National Guard's 148th Fighter Wing placed on alert status in case cartel operatives attempt to flee by private aircraft. This is not an arrest operation. This is a judicial eradication campaign. At exactly 6 a.m., the raids begin. In South Minneapolis, agents hit a luxury condominium where a cartel financial coordinator has been living under a false name. Inside, they find 200,000 fentanyl pills pressed to look like prescription oxycodone, packed in vacuum-sealed bags, labeled with fake pharmaceutical logos. Next to the pills, agents find 11 kilograms of heroin, $47,000 in cash, and a laptop open to an encrypted chat app showing real-time communication with Judge Abdi. In Columbus, Ohio, agents breach a warehouse in the Driving Park neighborhood. Inside, they find a drug super lab, industrial pill presses, chemical precursors imported from China, mixing vats, drying racks, over 300,000 fentanyl pills in various stages of production, and enough raw fentanyl powder to produce 2.1 million additional pills. Agents also find firearms, semi-automatic rifles, Glock pistols with extended magazines, and one item that stops everyone cold, a bullet-resistant vest with police printed across the chest in English and Somali. The vest belongs to a Minneapolis patrol officer who, according to seized documents, has been feeding intelligence to the cartel for 3 years. In Bloomington, Minnesota, agents raid a sprawling home in a gated community. Inside, they find a Hennepin County judge, his wife, and their 2 teenage children. The judge is arrested in his driveway wearing a bathrobe. Agents find $600,000 in cash hidden in a false wall in the master bedroom. They find luxury watches worth another $200,000. They find a handwritten ledger listing case numbers, defendant names, and payment amounts in his own handwriting. When agents confront him, he does not deny it. He simply says, "I want a lawyer." In St. Paul, agents execute a warrant at a Ramsey County judge's home. She is not there. Her car is not there. Federal investigators believe she was tipped off and fled. Agents find her passport, which means she is still in the country. U.S. Marshals issue a federal fugitive warrant. Within 6 hours, she is found hiding at a relative's home in Duluth, attempting to dye her hair and change her appearance. She is arrested without incident. In downtown Minneapolis, FBI agents walk into the Hennepin County Government Center at 7:32 a.m. They ride the elevator to the 8th floor. They walk past stunned court staff and security officers. They enter Judge Yasmin Farah Abdi's chambers. She is sitting at her desk reviewing case files. She looks up, she sees the agents, and she does not move, she does not speak. She simply places her hands flat on the desk and waits. An FBI agent reads her the arrest warrant: conspiracy to obstruct justice, bribery of a public official, racketeering, money laundering, wire fraud, leading a continuing criminal enterprise. She stands, she is handcuffed, and she is escorted through the hallways of the courthouse where she once presided over justice. Court employees watch in silence. Some are crying, others look away. By noon, federal agents have executed 73 search warrants and arrest warrants across Minnesota and Ohio. They seized 2.1 million fentanyl pills, 11 kilograms of heroin, 17 kilograms of methamphetamine, 6 kilograms of cocaine, 42 firearms, over $4 million in cash, 31 luxury vehicles, 7 residential properties, and server farms containing enough encrypted communications and financial records to build cases against hundreds of individuals connected to the cartel. The underworld took more damage in 6 hours than in the last 6 years. 2:41 p.m., FBI Minneapolis Field Office, Secure Investigation Suite. Federal investigators sit in a windowless conference room surrounded by printed documents, hard drives, and evidence bags. They are examining the seized communications logs from Judge Abdi's chambers. What they find is not just evidence of corruption, it is evidence of systemic infiltration. The cartel did not just buy judges, it bought access to the entire judicial process. Internal emails show that cartel operatives received advance notice of arrest warrants before they were executed. Law enforcement raid schedules were leaked hours or days in advance, giving suspects time to move drugs, destroy evidence, or disappear. In one case, a coordinated DEA and FBI operation targeting a fentanyl distribution network was compromised when a Minneapolis police sergeant, later identified as being on the cartel payroll, sent an encrypted message warning cartel members 12 hours before the raid. By the time agents arrived, the warehouse was empty. The suspects were gone, the drugs had been moved. Federal investigators also discover how deeply the cartel infiltrated Border Patrol and ICE operations. In one document, a U.S. Customs and Border Protection officer stationed in Pembina, North Dakota, is identified as receiving $25,000 per month to relax scrutiny on specific vehicles crossing from Canada into the United States. These vehicles, disguised as commercial trucks carrying agricultural products, were actually transporting bulk quantities of methamphetamine and fentanyl pills smuggled from Canada, where they were manufactured in labs run by Somali criminal networks operating in Toronto and Edmonton. The investigation uncovers falsified patrol grids. Minneapolis Police Department patrol logs show officers marking certain neighborhoods as fully patrolled when, in fact, they deliberately avoided those areas during specific hours to allow cartel drug distribution and money collection to proceed without interference. One patrol supervisor is found to have received $87,000 over 2 years to ensure that his officers did not disrupt cartel operations in the Cedar Riverside neighborhood. Honest officers within the Minneapolis Police Department and the Ramsey County Sheriff's Office are devastated. One veteran sergeant, a Somali American officer who joined the force specifically to serve his community, reads the leaked patrol logs and starts crying. I trusted these people, and what he says, I worked alongside them for years, and they were protecting criminals the whole time. Federal agents arrest 9 law enforcement officers across Minnesota and Ohio, 2 Minneapolis police sergeants, 3 patrol officers, 1 Hennepin County Sheriff's deputy, 1 Columbus police detective, 1 U.S. Border Patrol agent, and 1 ICE deportation officer who accepted bribes to delay or cancel deportation proceedings against cartel members facing removal. The arrests are not public yet. The Department of Justice wants to ensure that no additional corrupt officers are tipped off. But within law enforcement circles, the shock is seismic. These were not officers who looked the other way once or twice. These were officers who actively facilitated a criminal empire. They were a second secret police force working not for justice, but for the cartel. The badge will be rebuilt. The system will be cleaned, but the trust, once broken, will take years to restore. 6:19 p.m., Department of Justice, Washington, D.C. The Deputy Attorney General sits in a secure briefing room with senior officials from the FBI, DA, ICE, and Department of Homeland Security. On the screen in front of them is a map of the United States. Red lines stretch across the Midwest, connecting Minneapolis and Columbus to Seattle, Nashville, Atlanta, and Charlotte. Each line represents a trafficking route. Each line represents a pipeline for narcotics, fraudulent financial schemes, and human trafficking operations controlled by the Somali transnational criminal cartel. This was never just about Minnesota and Ohio. This was a continental operation. Federal investigators explain how the cartel used the Midwest as a strategic hub. Somali communities in Minneapolis and Columbus provided cultural cover, legitimate business infrastructure, and access to financial networks that moved money invisibly across borders. From there, the cartel distributed fentanyl pills and heroin to secondary markets in the South and Pacific Northwest using long-haul trucking companies that were either cartel-owned or controlled through intimidation and bribery. One document recovered from Judge Abdi's encrypted servers shows a logistics map labeled Route Sahara. It details how trucks carrying halal meat products from Somali-owned slaughterhouses were used as cover to transport narcotics. Way stations along Interstate 35, Interstate 70, and Interstate 90 were either bypassed using falsified commercial vehicle permits or staffed by inspectors who received monthly bribes to wave trucks through without inspection. In one case, a way station in Iowa was mysteriously shut down for maintenance on 11 separate occasions over 2 years, always on nights when cartel convoys were scheduled to pass through. The cartel also exploited refugee resettlement programs. Human trafficking operations brought East African migrants into the United States under false pretenses, promising jobs and legal status. Once in the country, migrants were forced into labor in cartel-controlled warehouses, restaurants, and transportation operations. Those who resisted were threatened with deportation or violence against family members still in refugee camps in Kenya and Uganda. One sealed file recovered from the investigation reveals a catastrophic final phase of Judge Abdi's plan. The document is titled Phase for Permanent Integration. The plan was to expand judicial corruption beyond Minnesota and Ohio into Wisconsin, Michigan, and Illinois. The goal was to create a multi-state safe zone where Somali cartel operations could function with near total immunity from criminal prosecution. The cartel planned to invest an additional $100 million over 10 years to recruit judges, prosecutors, and law enforcement officials in major Midwestern cities. The plan projected that within 15 years, the cartel could operate openly using legitimate businesses, political influence, and controlled courtrooms to become untouchable. This was not a criminal conspiracy. This was a hostile takeover of the American judicial system in the Midwest. The Deputy Attorney General closes the file. She looks at the assembled officials and says, "We stopped this, but we need to ask ourselves how 15 judges, 9 police officers, and dozens of other officials were compromised without anyone noticing until we went looking. That question should terrify every American." Power does not always need violence. Sometimes it only needs silence. Sometimes it only needs ambition. Sometimes it only needs people willing to look the other way when the price is right. What happened in Minnesota and Ohio was not an accident. It was not a few bad apples. It was a deliberate, calculated strategy to corrupt the institutions that Americans depend on to protect them. 15 judges accepted $63 million to turn courtrooms into auction houses. They compromised 1,200 cases, 1,200 times that justice was denied, 1,200 times that a victim, a family, a community was told that the system failed them. But the real victims are not just the people in those 1,200 cases. The real victims are the thousands of lives destroyed by fentanyl pills that should never have reached the streets because the dealers should have been in prison. The real victims are the Somali American communities in Minneapolis and Columbus, who are now painted with suspicion because a criminal network exploited their identity and their struggles for cover. The real victims are the honest judges, the honest cops, the honest public servants who woke up one morning to discover that their colleagues, their friends, were traitors. This story is a warning. It is a warning that no institution, no matter how sacred, is immune to corruption when enough money and enough ambition meet in the dark. It is a warning that we cannot assume integrity. We have to verify it. We have to watch it. We have to protect it. If you are still watching this, tap like so more people see this story. Share this video with someone who needs to know how deep corruption can go and how close it came to permanent victory. Comment expose if you want this kind of infiltration dragged into the light and prosecuted to the full extent of the law. The 15 judges will stand trial in federal court. Most will plead guilty. The evidence is overwhelming. Recorded conversations, financial transfers, testimony from cooperating witnesses. They will spend decades in federal prison. Judge Yasmin Farah Abdi, the architect of Operation Kakli Galbid, faces life imprisonment without parole. The 9 corrupt law enforcement officers will also stand trial. Their badges have been stripped. Their pensions have been forfeited. They will be prosecuted as traitors to the oath they swore. The 1,200 compromised cases are being reviewed. Some defendants will be retried. Some will see their cases reopened. Some will go free because too much time has passed, because witnesses have died, because justice delayed is justice denied. The Department of Justice has established a new task force to examine judicial corruption vulnerabilities nationwide. Congress is holding hearings. Reforms are being proposed. Financial disclosure rules for judges are being strengthened. Oversight mechanisms are being built. But laws and reforms only work if the people enforcing them are honest. And that is the lesson we must never forget. Justice is not a guarantee, it is a choice. And when the people in power choose money over duty, when they choose silence over courage, when they choose complicity over integrity, the system collapses. Not loudly, not all at once, but quietly, one compromise case at a time, until justice becomes a word without meaning. 15 judges sold justice for $63 million. They thought they were untouchable. They thought the system was too slow, too trusting, too blind to stop them. They were wrong.